Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar with Choice Solutions and Pax8 today. We're excited to cover this topic with you this morning. So it is 10 o'clock Central on the dot. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things over to Dana Steinlage with Choice Solutions.
Ellie, thank you, and good morning, good day, everybody. It's great to have you all joining us. We appreciate your time greatly, and it's a beautiful February day here in the Central U.S. So, I'm one of the partners and co-lead up our sales organization. Just on behalf of our team, thank you for joining us. We kind of set this conversation up for today just because we've been engaged in a lot of discussions, and frankly, this goes back a few years on organizations and customers, especially in that small or medium-sized market space, and wanting to make that transition into the cloud. And so it's been something that's been on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. There might be different limitations that have prevented that from being something possible in the past, but more recently, seeing more and more that it's an opportunity, and it's something that our clients are able to take advantage of. So we thought we'd get together this session here today. It'll allow you to gather insights, answer questions, things like that. So I'm going to go in, just for those of you who may not be too familiar with our company yet, just a couple minutes on us, and then I'm going to get things transitioned over to Blake and Randy from our team to kind of go through some great stuff today. So again, thanks for joining us today. Again, for those of you who may not be familiar with us, this is a quick snapshot photo of our team. We all got together, about 65, coming up on 70 team members. So some of the things that are very applicable to us internally as a business are very applicable to a lot of you that might be joining us today in terms of IT challenges or things you might be thinking about for the future for your organization. So we primarily work within the central part of the U.S., grow into the Southeast, and also growing into the Great Lakes. So again, we got folks joining us from all parts of those regions and even other parts of the country. So it's great to have you here today. And I look forward to kind of sharing some insights with you. So our focus a lot on organizations is, as you're working as an IT or as a business leader, you want to make sure your workforce has access to the applications, to the services, the things they need, the workspace, the most high performing, consistent workspace experience, all the while for you as a business, making sure that's secure, and you have proper controls to make sure protecting intellectual property, things like that. All the while, as an organization, kind of behind the scenes, been working to maybe transition from legacy applications in your business and maybe transitioning to SaaS or legacy infrastructure approaches, which kind of ties into today and why you might be joining us today. Maybe legacy ways of doing things for infrastructure spend and CapEx and things like that, and a desire maybe to move to something like Azure that might give you some of the flexibility, scalability, maybe usage-based consumption approach, things like that. But all with that, there is a change in security, how we're securing things from traditional IT, security environments to newer things, whether you're leveraging cloud, hybrid cloud, and whatnot. So, but as a business, you're facing challenges, right, with IT constraints. So whether it's the ability to do new projects that are strategic for the business, or new projects that might be behind the scenes but important to IT and the rest of the organization, or if it's the ability to do the regular operations, as well as being able to attract and maybe retain IT talent. So there's challenges that everyone's facing there, whether it be, and then looking for simpler solutions and or partners that might be able to help with services and things like that. So that's a little bit for us as a company. We're going to talk today, obviously, Microsoft and Azure, whether it be M365 and Azure. We can be a partner for you as a source to acquire anything you might need in that space, but a real value of ours is in the people. So in the expertise that we have in-house, whether it be to help you execute on new projects, or if you have a need for kind of the day-to-day, the operational upkeep, needing a strong partner that's got the processes, the technology tools, maybe they've gone through things like SOC 2 compliance, things like that, to be able to be a partner for you in your ongoing operations. And so those are the things that we can do for you. So we're finding, and you guys may or may not, it may differ depending on your business, but there's a gap in the marketplace, and a gap in terms of strong IT partners that might be out there to be of service to your business. And so for us as a company, that's a big focus of ours. We want to fit that gap in the areas that we're a good fit. We've got tremendous in-house expertise. We've got tenured people that's incredible for our industry that we have on our team. One of which we introduce you to here shortly. But just a way of doing business, I think you'll appreciate. And again, just somebody that wants to be not only just somebody to help you with a project, but to be an ongoing partner, bringing value to you and your team. And that's who we are. So some of the core technology partners we have in our portfolio kind of goes from whether you're on-prem in the data center or you leverage in cloud infrastructure, cloud services, all the way down to that secure endpoint. Just a variety of best-in-class technology tools that we've brought into our portfolio to help with how you're accessing things securely, making sure data protection, maybe offsite recovery, disaster recovery as a service, cybersecurity prevention, and a number of layers there. So a number of things we brought into our portfolio to bring value to you, and help protect your organization. And specific to Microsoft, since this will be a little bit of our focus here today, we've invested heavily, and we're continuing to invest heavily, again, in our people and our team and expertise to help bring value to organizations that are leveraging Microsoft technologies in their environment. There's a couple things with modern work and infrastructure within Azure that we've earned some accreditations with that were not easy to come by. Again, we're a Microsoft CSP, and when I kind of introduce you to Blake here shortly, as a CSP, we help you, and we work through a cloud commerce marketplace partner, and that's what Pax8 is for our business. They bring a ton of value and a kind of extension of our team. So they bring value that we can then kind of bring value to you and the challenges, the questions, the things you might be thinking about as an organization. But yeah, just a quick snapshot on our capabilities there. But at this time, I kind of want to transition and get you introduced to Blake Klausner, who's an infrastructure solutions consultant with Pax8, as well as Randy Kern, a longtime member of our team here at Choice Solutions and Director of Cloud Services. So guys, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. So again, kind of the premise we're going to talk about today is kind of the journey we've had with some of our customers, and also the insights that Blake has from the many partners that he helps advise in terms of transitioning, customers of all sizes, but we're going to focus more on SMB today. What we found is that a lot of the enterprise customers have kind of already started down this journey and really kind of made that migration. But we're seeing in the last, I would say, really 18 to 24 months, really kind of post-COVID, right? And even part way through COVID was really this impetus around moving infrastructure, but due to refreshes, moving to quickly and agilely scale to add virtual desktop or end user computing platforms to the business, that has really driven kind of this adoption down into the SMB and even small to mid enterprise. So that's going to be kind of our focus for today that we're going to go through. So with that, we'll jump into the agenda. So today, obviously, we're going to jump into introductions, introduce myself and Blake in just a moment here, and then we'll touch base on really, why is the cloud adoption? What is driving this, and how is this really akin to some of the things we've seen historically in the world before? Then we'll talk about some key specific solutions we think that are probably most relevant to kind of especially the SMB and small mid enterprise, and then we'll wrap up with some questions time at the end there. By all means, if you do have questions throughout, please post them into the Q&A section down below. You should be able to do that. We'll try to answer them if we can real time. If we can, if not, we'll try to catch them at the very end then, and we'll queue those questions up as necessary. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Blake.
You bet. Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate the time and the opportunity. Glad to be here. Just a little bit about myself, the why. Wife, kids. They're wonderful. Love them to death. I'm a fourth generation Texas Aggie. I'm based out of San Antonio, Texas. While I love technology and things cutting edge, I also like the outdoors. I do multi-sports. But my professional background, I spent 8+ years at a managed hosting service provider. So got my early start in physical servers and private cloud with Hyper-V VMware, beginning stages of public cloud and hyperscalers with OpenStack, open source platform, and then quickly into Microsoft Azure and AWS before moving to Pax8. So now I've been a cloud infrastructure specialist for the past 5+ years, working for a cloud marketplace. And I really love sharing information. That's what really drives me.
All right. Thanks, Blake. So again, Randy Kern, Director of Cloud Services with Choice Solutions. So obviously you can see, go Chiefs, baby. That's the big game on Sunday we're hosting. So we're super excited about that. This picture is a little dated. My daughter's now 4 years old. So this is, I think, the first Super Bowl run we were getting ready to take a run at. So we're pretty excited about, going for number 3 now. But with that, I'm an Iowa State alum. My wife, unfortunately, is a Hawkeye. So we are a house divided. That makes those football games all sorts of fun. And unfortunately, the track record has not been good for my team. Outside of that, I do enjoy the outdoors as well. I spend a fair amount of time hunting, specifically fishing is kind of my real passion. I enjoy getting out in the water. Got my daughter out there for the first time last year. That was super exciting. So really looking forward to doing some more of that this year. We obviously are a football family, and as Dana would attest to, I always enjoy a good cocktail when I get the chance to do that. So
Nice.
history is spent 9 years at a Fortune 100. So have seen kind of, and that was in the early days of major monolithic SANs, 6-month upgrades, lift and shift for all of that kind of equipment and hardware, trying to budget the cycles for, 3 to 5 year growth patterns, the backups, doing virtualization, going from bare metal to virtualization, as a matter of fact. So I've kind of cut my teeth, kind of in the upper echelons, and then I've spent the last 15 years here in August, actually, with Choice Solutions doing consulting. And we started off doing professional services consulting, which is really more that identifying a business problem, bringing technology tools and services to deploy a solution, and then kind of stepping away and walking away from it. And organically, over the course of that 15 years, we kind of had customers come back and say, hey, can you really take this on and manage it for us? And so we kind of evolved, and I've shifted in my role over kind of more towards helping to do architecture design, and then ongoing management and kind of VCIO roles with our managed services department as we've gone forward. So that's kind of what my background has been, what I've been doing for the last probably 5 or 6 years now in Choice Solutions. And again, a big part of not just the Choice culture, but what I enjoy as well is really building relationships with our customers and really going out and figuring out how we can solve their business challenges to the struggles that whether it be through IT or services or what it might be, but providing those challenges and growing that relationship with our customers is really kind of what gets me up in the morning and gets me doing what I do every day. So with that, Blake, I'll turn it back over to you.
And if we've got any football fans in the audience, go ahead and comment in the chat who you're picking. I'm a fair weather Cowboys fan. I told Randy, I'm not ashamed either. It is what it is. I know my place in life. So there you go. All right. Real quick. Pax8, we were founded in 2012, 1,900 plus employees. When I had started, there was about 200. We've grown internationally, 33,000 partners. They estimate there to be about 125,000 managed service providers in the United States. And we have a partnership with 33,000. So we see a lot of things. I have a lot of conversations, very familiar with the ins and outs of what people are trying to do, and the problems they're trying to solve. So the requisite, here's a little bit about us and Pax8 as a cloud distributor. We're living in a changing world. There's a lot going on, and it feels like it's just picking up. This whole concept of, okay, the mainframe, the dedicated servers, the PC era, virtualization, public cloud, AI, all of these things are happening very, very fast. You only need to look at the headlines to kind of see how things are changing, and it being important to have your finger on those changes as it relates to technology. However, I want to take you back, way, way back, in the days before electricity. So every business that needed to generate power or movement, it would be located on a river. They would have a water wheel to pull and move the belts and pulleys. Slowly but surely, that led into manufacturing facilities having dynamos for power generation. So you think about the investment that went into that. and the individuals, the human capital involved in acquiring some of those devices, on into the modern day electrical grid. And so now we just plug into our outlet and we pay utility basis or a utility amount for the energy that we consume. Well, this is not too far removed from what we're going through as it relates to technology and computing. And so we're getting to a point where maybe it doesn't make as much sense for a variety of reasons to continue on with the on-premises solution. And we're going to talk about a handful of those today. The reasons why or why not. There are good reasons to use the cloud and maybe some not so much. And it's important to know what you're after to be able to make the best decision there. Ultimately, there is a digital imperative to then have some sort of presence in the cloud, moving to the cloud entirely, or at the very least, starting to become more familiar with the public cloud so that you can make those proper decisions. What we feel, kind of like Randy had talked about, is that over the past decade, more of the enterprise mid-market space had moved to the public cloud, whereas SMB had really not. And that's okay because there's a time and place for all these things. But with the introduction of AI, some of the things going on with Microsoft Copilot, AI-enabled licenses and offerings, it's important to have a landscape that includes the cloud to make the most of those cutting edge technologies. Now, say what you will about the differences between a massive capital expenditure upfront versus operational expenditures ongoing, which may be reason enough to make this jump. But figure out the why so that we can then figure out the how. We have spent a lot of money here at Pax8 doing some research, working with the major organizations that publish the various reports, Forrester specifically, that most decisions can be tied back to three main value drivers. And so why are you making these decisions? What is the focus of the business? Is it to increase revenue? We just want to grow the business, more money. Are you happy with your place in the market and where you're at, but you'd like to gain efficiencies with how you are managing infrastructure? Or are you looking to reduce risk? Do you have a bunch of legacy solutions where you've kind of considered cloud in the past, but the time wasn't right? Maybe there are things that are not being patched or updated as they should, and therefore that presents a risk. So as you're thinking about these things today and walking through this conversation, if you'll start to remember the reasons for having this conversation or what you're looking to do or accomplish. So ultimately, public cloud is known for the ability to do more with less. And the reason for that is because it is a utility build product. All products and services in the public cloud, by and large, are available to all. Sure, there's some governmental restrictions with China, Germany, but by and large, you have full-time access to basically anything that you might need. And so this idea that you don't have to go through these long 6 year and a half long upgrade cycles and projects. How often are you told about new business needs right before it's needed? New person gets brought on board and hired without your knowledge, or maybe it's another major initiative, a major marketing project that you were not brought up to speed on, or something even more extreme like a company merger. and you're told a week ahead of time or a month ahead of time. And so not necessarily the same amount of time that you would prefer to be able to review and plan and decide. From an on-prem perspective, in the cloud, it's a little bit more straightforward. And also the operational efficiency. So having these systems tied in together. So my focus specifically is Microsoft Azure. I'll also mention that Pax8 and Choice Solutions, they do a little bit of work with AWS, but primarily my focus is on Azure. And we find that a lot of entities, maybe they've already streamlined around Microsoft 365, moving from on-prem Exchange Server, SharePoint Server into the cloud. Well, that now makes sense that you've got this Microsoft tenant, you've got these productivity tools, you're storing data and things like SharePoint and OneDrive, and you then want to make the most of those things by also deploying within Azure. So a unified data platform will allow for the introduction of some of the cutting edge technologies like Microsoft Copilot and AI enablement.
It also allows for that authorization and authentication and IDP management with Azure, or now Entra ID, was Azure Active Directory, as well as providing multi-factor authentication, which today becomes an even bigger conversation. Like if you're not doing multi-factor authentication today, please go, I don't care who it is, go find a partner, get involved with that. That is almost a must in today's era, especially with the risk that we have in terms of, you know, the bad threat actors. Ransomware is very real. We're dealing with it, you know, on a, you know, monthly basis. You know, in most cases, we're able to with the tools we're deploying, catch it before it can really be proliferate in the environment and be detonated. But still, we're seeing it, you know, monthly basis, if not weekly in some cases. So if you think that you're not having it happen, I guarantee you likely are. And one of the first things you can do to secure that is getting in front of that with the identity providers. Specifically, if you're already doing M365, you're already tied into Azure Active Directory or Entra ID now with multi-factor authentication just makes a lot of sense.
100%, Randy. And actually, quick little segue, quick reminder to work with your families, your parents, to
Yes.
enable MFA and walk them through authentication and get that set up for them. So I know that I've been working actively with my parents to coach them up every single time. Don't click on that link, review the email, make sure that it's not misspelled. But very much so, please, please, please work with those that are less technical and get them to implement MFA across the board. All accounts, especially financial. Off my soapbox. Okay, so when we get down to the basics of the cloud, essentially it's someone else's server infrastructure by and large. And so there's this concept of the shared responsibility model whereby there is less to do when you are making that movement into the cloud. And some of you are probably familiar with some of these acronyms. We try and stay away from those because not everyone is familiar, but infrastructure as a service, that would be the IaaS. So think about just basic lift and shift of virtual machines, server infrastructure into the cloud. Platform as a service is the next iteration. So yes, you're moving workloads into the cloud, but you're using the platform as a service offering. Probably the best example of this is the difference between a virtual machine in Azure running SQL as the database server or utilizing Azure SQL DB. So there is less to manage. By and large, these platform as a service solutions are redundant by nature, tend to include things like backups, tend to be monitored and tuned, maybe more so than just the VM infrastructure. And then SaaS, or software as a service, that would be more of a cloud-based, browser-based application that you don't have to run on server infrastructure in Azure. So various applications in use, I would imagine that quite a few of the attendees today have a whole suite of SaaS products, software as a service solutions that are then integrated into your identity provider. But keep that in mind from an on-premises perspective and what to do with that infrastructure. So talking about gaining efficiencies, doing more with less, there is simply less to manage when you move off of the on-premises deployments.
Yeah, and this chart is really good in terms of outlining, giving you a good idea of kind of what Microsoft's responsible for, specifically in this case, when we're talking about Azure, what they're providing from the platform perspective. So again, the lowest level is that infrastructure as a service, where again, this is what you would talk about from your traditional like lift and shift migrations, when you're taking your on-prem physical hardware and your virtual machines, and you want to migrate them into Azure, so you don't have to do that next on-prem hardware refresh, whatever that looks like, right? And you're trying to avoid those costs and that every 3 to 5 year upgrade refresh cycle that may include, you know, physical hardware, switches, UPSs, backup systems, right? And you're going to move it to Azure, where you can take advantage of those systems up there. So at that point, Microsoft is providing the physical host, the network, and the data center. But from on up, you're still responsible, or if you engage a partner with managed services like we can provide as well, we can help manage that upper stack. But that's kind of where Microsoft starts to draw the line, right? It's a shared security and responsibility model. They're going to be responsible for the physical security around the host, the network, and the data center. So again, your hypervisor platform, essentially, if you will. And then from on up, it becomes a responsibility for the tenant subscription, which is how Azure is consumed, which is how you're going to deploy your VMs and services inside of there to maintain those network controls, the identity and access, and then as well as kind of the compliance and security configurations on the OS and above. So there's, as you go up the stack, as Blake mentioned, right, you get into platform as a service. Again, he mentioned SQL, and the one I see very commonly is Azure Files. Instead of deploying a physical file server with then data shares and paying for an OS license and the OS patching and everything else that goes along with it, we can now deploy simply files as a service out of Azure and bring those file services back down. We still share some responsibility, but we've now eliminated that OS layer, right? And so that reduces some cost overall. And it also means that we don't have to worry about the ongoing patching, management, the security of that OS with endpoint agents and that aspect. So again, as you start walking up this chain, you may pay a little more, but you're also offsetting a lot in terms of the security, as well as the manpower and services to maintain those pieces you're no longer responsible for. And so that's why you'll see those costs may scale up. A prime example of SaaS would be, as we mentioned before, Office or M365, right? If you're consuming your email from the cloud, getting those services, those are all SaaS-based services that you're already consuming. And in most cases, that's where most people honestly have started in Azure, and we're actually adding services from the back end into this equation. So sorry, with that, I'll turn it back over to Blake.
100% agree there. So just as a whole, we're here to talk about Microsoft Azure today. Now, there's a lot of things within the Microsoft Azure platform or stack. There are something like 30,000 some odd unique SKUs in Azure. So it can be complex, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. You don't have to make use of every single piece of technology that exists. We just need to help morph and mold your solution to fit your needs. No more, no less. So sometimes I'll have conversations with either the partner or the end client, and they're excited to move to the cloud. And they're going to completely transform their environment. But come to find out, maybe there's one unique little situation that it doesn't necessarily make sense to use that product. And that's what we're all about, is enabling people and making the right decisions, because there can be an incorrect approach to cloud. We just hope that you'll start to consider it more and figure out how it can work for you. So one of the important aspects of this is this concept of being highly available. Now, a variety of services that each have their own separate service level agreement and uptime commitments. But ultimately, when comparing something that exists in a data center, a region for one of the hyperscalers, this is going to be a massive improvement upon what most environments look like today. Now, I'm sure there's attendees today that have a very robust stance when it comes to their data center, or maybe a co-location facility. Maybe it's in a top-notch facility, something like Switch. So you've got redundant devices with spares sitting at the side at the ready. HVAC systems that are redundant in nature, power supply, generators that are redundant with service contracts and fuel contracts in support of those things. So some have gone through their environment and the investments to make it more robust. Whereas for a fraction of that cost, and again, this movement from capital expenditures into operational expenditures, you can get so much more in terms of the availability, the redundancy, the greater SLAs regarding uptime than maybe a comparable on-prem solution.
Yeah, the nice thing about the high availability that he's talking about too is that, obviously each Azure region has multiple data centers inside the region. So you're not just getting a data center, you're actually getting typically at least three that are where your services can potentially be held and managed across. So again, you think in terms of the scale out and the build out you would have to do. And that doesn't include some of the other services you can tie on then if you have very high uptime and requirements like Azure Site Recovery, where you can literally spin up an entirely different region of Azure, the workloads or VMs, if you have those kind of requirements and needs in terms of business, your RPO and recovery point objective or recovery time objective to get those services back up to, minimize that revenue loss from a downtime of IT services or systems perspective. So there is a lot that comes with this kind of built in behind the scenes that you already take advantage of just by deploying to Azure, number one. But number two, using some of the additional services that we can add on top of this once you're out there further enhances that DR as a service and or strategy conversation going forward.
Agreed. Yeah, and like Randy's saying, maybe it comes down to your own service level agreements with your customers, or maybe there are some, your insurance provider requires you to take certain precautions or measures to ensure an HA or a DR, highly available or disaster recovery type solution. But Randy and team, they can work with you all, figure out what your recovery point objective is, the recovery time objective, and how many seconds or minutes or hours and the associated costs if there were some sort of an issue. Because there are varying degrees that you can architect these solutions to once again meet your exact needs. So scalability, don't have to say too much about this. It's a utility-based product. There's an ability for anyone basically in the globe with a credit card can create a free account and can spin up some free Azure resources. Same is true with businesses or anyone else. There are very few things that are necessarily barred. Maybe there was a point in time 10, 15 years ago where maybe you had to double check or you had to verify that certain types of solutions were available under a certain cloud or in a certain region. We've now gotten beyond that, where by and large, if you need something, it is available, where that wasn't always the case when it came to public cloud. I can remember a typhoon going through Taiwan years and years ago and really impacted the global SSD market. Was it like 2014 timeframe? And for a good 2 years or so, it was really hard to get that hardware. We don't really see that on the cloud side because the major providers Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they're staying on top of their needs and sourcing channels. So the ability to provision what you need immediately. Whereas on the on-premises side, oftentimes you would have to order those solutions and server infrastructure well in advance.
And while you can go swipe your credit card, please don't just go do that. Please reach out to a partner or someone to help you with that. Yes, you can do it, but that's not the way to really procure and consume cloud services, regardless of who the platform is that you're on. There are better ways to consume that and then help control costs. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But yes, while you can, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
Good point, Randy. And then, I'll also mention that scalability means that you can wind it down as well. So maybe there's a part of the business that's getting sold off, or maybe going through some hard times and need to kind of scale in what you've got because you simply don't have the same number of customers or the same number of employees. And so we can very easily do that. And gone are the days of making projections of 6 years in advance to try and stay ahead of the growth that you need. Because what happens if that growth never comes about? In the cloud, you can wind those things down or change the sizes of certain solutions or products so that they cost less. So this is a big one. The security, governance, and compliance stance. And this is always going to be the big topic. We've got a whole team of specialists and architects, vendors on the Pax8 line card that deal exclusively with security. And even though I'm the biggest Azure infrastructure proponent, I kind of know my place in today's world. And if you are not keeping on top of your security stance, then you're likely going to fall behind. Now, there are a lot of products, and I had thought about sharing a visualization of all the numerous products that are available with Microsoft related to Azure that have to do with security. But I also know that Choice Solutions, Dana, Randy, and team, they have a very curated approach to their security footprint and the various products that they use. It does occasionally make sense to have a platform or a solution not with the same entity that you've got something else. Randy, any comments on your approach specifically to security, governance, and compliance?
Yeah, so that strategy varies ultimately on customer by customer, because it's going to start with what is your security policies. At the end of the day, it really comes down to what are your security standards, and in most cases, when we start talking with kind of that mid to small enterprise business level, a lot of cases those aren't defined, right? And so that's usually step one, is really a step back to talk to the business, and typically it's with legal to really determine what are your compliance requirements. What do you have to have? As Blake mentioned earlier, a lot of cybersecurity insurance now is requiring more and more diligence in terms of security posturing. What is deployed? How are your backups? What is your recovery time and recovery point objectives look like? In terms, have you exercised a DR recovery strategy? And so all of those things go into helping to drive what ultimately goes into what your security, governance, and compliance strategy is going to be inside of any cloud environment. Once we've defined that, we can then layer in, and again, whether it's using native Azure components, and to Blake's point, the Defender suite, which covers pretty much anything from the on-prem agents in your environment all the way up to M365 to everything in Azure, right? If you name it, there's probably a tool that can do it. And that includes their Scene product that can, visualize into everything that is going on both in Azure, but also extend to the on-prem. But we can also then look at, from a governance and compliance, get that kind of pane of glass visibility. We bring other tools into play that we feel in certain situations may meet a better requirement, but again, not always. We've actually just made a big shift on internally to, we used to bring in a third-party kind of antivirus solution, and over the course of like the past 18 months, we've really moved to Defender for Endpoint. It really kind of has, Microsoft has made a very large invest, and I forget the exact numbers now. I was on a webinar the other day with them talking about that, but they employ, I think it's like 1,800 or 2,000 security engineering team members focused on just securing and putting governance and best practices around their entire security suite product stack and into Azure as well. So we start looking at what do you have internally, even enterprise level, to be perfectly honest, they may have 10, 12 security folks, maybe 20, 25. No one's doing it at the scale and level that these large cloud providers are doing it, right? So in terms of the tooling that there is available, we can bring those aspects where it makes sense. Again, like everything, there's costs associated with these things, right? So we want to make sure we balance that with the right combination of what is your security requirements, what is the governance requirements, and what are your compliance requirements, and how do we meet those and ensure that we're staying ahead of that security curve to the best of our ability, but we're also not overpaying for something that may not make sense for the kind of business that you're in. So that's always kind of the challenge and struggle we work with here. And we've got a team that we can bring in that they will work with you to kind of design what does that need to look like and what are those services as we deploy that into an Azure environment.
Good point. Yeah, and I will say that Microsoft, they often tout themselves as the most compliant cloud. They say that because they've got more compliance certifications globally than any other hyperscaler public cloud. But I'd encourage you to take a quick look at the Microsoft Trust Center and the compliance offerings. You can search for that. And they have a wealth of information focused just on the various compliance standards. So if you are in a particular industry and have a particular focus in meeting certain standards, there's some documentation in support of that. Certainly the Choice Solutions team can walk you through that and provide some of that, that data and documents. Okay. Need to pick it up here. Manageability of the cloud. So there are various methods that can be used. Some automation can put in place. The ease of redeploying or provisioning from snapshots or backups. The ability to see all this stuff in a single pane of glass. So the manageability of this, it's one solution. It's in the Azure portal. I know that there's different levels of customers and what they require. A lot are moving to the managed services, but some may still do co-managed IT. And you have full and complete access. So there are some offerings where you are abstracted away from the infrastructure and are not able to maybe touch or interact. But in Azure, it's your tenant, your Microsoft account. It is simply Choice Solutions who's invited to help manage that environment. So ultimately, you control your account and who has access and what they do.
Yeah, and to Blake's point, a lot of what we're doing now is deployments via infrastructure as code. So we're writing, specifically in Microsoft, it's bicep templates to really configure what we want the Azure environment to look like, which is nice because it makes it something we can reuse, we can redeploy if necessary, gives us a framework to quickly and get that stuff up and running. And based upon a prescriptive set of details, I don't have to worry about somebody clicking button, potentially misconfiguring. So it also helps from that, the human error aspect.
That's right. So I had mentioned how when I first started, there was about 200 employees. Now we're closer to 2,000 in just 5 short years. Well, really, it's because as the cloud marketplace focused on channel, right place at right time. So the past decade plus was the enterprise, upper mid-market. Now SMBs, they've finally reached that point where they're moving to the cloud. And most of those are then working with managed service providers and some sort of a managed services package. So real quick, just want to talk about 3 different areas of opportunities, some things that we see from our side, a lot of entities moving to, the first of which being Azure Virtual Desktop. So this not necessarily new, and as a matter of fact, it has its origins initially in terminal services, which morphed into RDS, remote desktop services, into occasionally on-premises solutions, things like VDI, Citrix, maybe RDS farms from a multi-tenant perspective, or individual customer deployments. Now is the day of Azure Virtual Desktop, and without getting too much into the details, there were quite a few server roles and components that are required in a larger cloud desktop environment. So essentially what Microsoft has done is they have taken a lot of those pieces and they now manage them on the customer's behalf. So historically on our RDS, something like a licensing server, the connection broker, certainly the session host, the identity piece. Nowadays with Azure Virtual Desktop, you really need to focus on the identity, the profile container for those users, and the session hosts themselves. Everything else is really complementary. But if you've got flexible staffing needs, sometimes in the healthcare industry that may come up, cloud-based desktops, easily able to secure PII. Maybe in the finance world, I know tax season is coming up. We see some CPA firms that'll provide their professional hourly workers, accountants, CPAs that they bring on, they'll provide a cloud-based desktop for a short period of time.
And the other thing to talk about just high levelly here, just to, at least from a knowledge perspective, is while Azure Virtual Desktop is available, there's also now the new Cloud PC entitlement. So again, if you need to customize and manage a unique custom image of Windows with specific applications, whatever else inside of it, Azure Virtual Desktop is probably going to be the use case. But if you just need a basic Windows 11 with the Office Suite desktop, and you're consuming purely SaaS apps, the new Cloud PC options may be something we can look at from that perspective, where it's literally a desktop that's completely managed and maintained by Microsoft. And you literally subscribe to it, you turn it on for a user, it's a subscription base, and they log into it just as if they were logging into their Office 365 portal, consume the desktop, and they're off when they're running. So again, that's a newer, in the last, I would say 18 months, really came to the forefront from a Microsoft perspective. We saw a lot of AVD when we did COVID, was a really a big emphasis of some of the real big cloud adoption and move, because that quickly ability to turn that up and connect it back into on-prem. But if you just need a desktop that's in the cloud and just has internet access, that Cloud PC may be something you want to look at as well.
Good point, Randy. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, that is the next iteration. So thinking back to IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, this is that natural progression with the Windows 365 Cloud PC being more of the platform as a service, whereas Azure Virtual Desktop needing to manage the infrastructure and support of it is more of the infrastructure as a service. Another opportunity we're seeing is with file servers. Maybe a lot of the business applications have now moved to a cloud-based offering. And we're seeing a lot of Active Directory, domain controllers sitting on-prem, a lot of file servers. Yes, there is the ability to use SharePoint Online. We highly encourage that, because if you own the licenses, the storage there is free. Now it kind of depends on the use case, the users. Some love SharePoint, some do not. Some would prefer just to keep a traditional SMB share. So there is the ability to provision what is called Azure Files. There is less to manage, more redundant by nature, a little bit more straightforward and lower cost than the alternative of just simply provisioning a VM in Azure and calling it a file server. And the third one that we'll cover here is legacy OS. So we are now beyond the point of Windows Server 2012 and R2. October 10th, 2023 was the cutoff date. And so moving forward, either you need to modernize to a more recent version of Windows Server, or you need to see about facilitating extended security updates. So historically, there's only been two options. You could either migrate the solution to Azure for free extended security updates, or if you had an enterprise agreement. Now we're starting to see Microsoft push off or push away the EAs more in preference of working with the partner group through CSP. But traditionally, those are the only two options. They have now come out with a third option, and you can keep a server on premises, spin up an Azure subscription, implement Azure Arc, and apply an agent for the ESUs. You are then billed monthly for the number of legacy servers that are receiving those updates. So if you have any sitting around 2012 or even older in some cases, you should see about those ESUs facilitated through Azure. All right, so really quickly here, just talking about some general items. You may want to look into the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework and some general guidance and advice around how to move to the cloud, what you might address first, and the path to get there. Hopefully you're seeing sort of a theme around not all at once, not everything. You don't have to go to 0 to 100 right away, but slowly but surely. So the very basic things like basic web servers, line of business apps, maybe the identity piece, you can get that into the cloud. Or maybe there are a handful of solutions that are already these SaaS-based offerings that are already integrated within your identity provider. Different things are next to move, maybe those that are more complex or higher business impact. You kind of want to have a little bit of a proof of concept, if you will, for the easier things, then moving on to the more important, and then ultimately the harder, costly to move things. I hear all the time, we've got a legacy application. I don't know who that developer is, or they've retired, and our entire business is built upon this system. Maybe this will be the encouragement as you're moving everything else to the cloud to begin focusing a little bit more on the legacy applications that are much more difficult to refactor and modernize. One of the tools that we'll often use is Azure Migrate. So this is more of a collection or an umbrella of different tools that you can use, but essentially we're using that to assess, migrate, and modernize. So a variety of different subsequent tools depending on what you're looking to evaluate or migrate. But Azure Migrate by and large is free and available, and the tool that we'll often use in these conversations.
Yeah, it's a common tool to do initial data gathering. So any kind of conversation about moving or lifting and shifting or trying to look at Azure is going to start with data gathering, to understand the environment, the use cases, what's there. This is one of the tools that get deployed in the environment. It's a free to use tool. Again, it does require setting up an Azure tenant and then running the service from the Azure tenant. But again, it's a really a no cost kind of solution that we can deploy, put in the Azure tenant, and then look at what it takes to migrate. And then again, that tool allows us to then stage synchronization and migrations of data even up into the cloud as well later on. So it's a very integral tool, and one that Microsoft has brought and made available to us to leverage to help do that transition and migrations.
Really quickly on the various Microsoft programs. So Randy had mentioned earlier about not going direct with a credit card. And there's a couple of reasons why you might not want to, but just so you are familiar, Choice Solutions operates through the Cloud Solutions Provider program with Microsoft. Slowly but surely, they've been making changes to open and volume. SPLA is another one. Enterprise agreements, they've been encouraging partners or upping the requirements to source those things. And the reason to go through Choice Solutions and the CSP program is because not only do you have their expertise and support, but the formal Microsoft Pro Direct support is included. If you are on a pay-as-you-go billed to a credit card, you're going to have to pay for those support escalations to Microsoft. It's also quite a bit longer of a delay going through that path to gain support as opposed to through a group like Choice Solutions. Same sort of thing with an enterprise agreement. I've worked with very large end clients who would pay professional services tens of thousands of dollars, over $100,000 in one case, just so that their support contract would go away. And so they did that. So just an FYI, there are also nonprofit sponsorships. Microsoft recently changed that from $3,500 a year to $2,000. So when you divide that by 12 months, it's not a whole lot of money in terms of free credits there. And then it reverts more to that pay-as-you-go type subscription where support is not included. So please speak with Randy and team before you go about setting up an account on a credit card, for example. And real quick, we talked a lot about the opportunity and these benefits that you have. But we also want to talk about cost optimization, because this is probably one of the most concerning things about people's decisions to move to the cloud, because ultimately people have found that it was maybe a little bit more expensive than on premises. And I acknowledge that. If you don't have the proper approach, you don't move the right things to the cloud, or once it's in the cloud, you're not familiar with how to reduce costs or how to become more efficient. Things like reserved instances, making a 1 or 3 year commitment for a 40 to a 60% discount. Things like Azure Savings Plan, Azure Hybrid Benefit, bringing your own Windows and SQL licenses that you already own can save a lot of money. Maybe using some automation, some VM start stop, proper architecture and sizing. Let's not overbuild, overspec, and pay for more than what you need, because all this stuff is scalable on the fly. And see a lot of legacy stuff, just not good management. Hey, that says dev. Should we turn that off? Oh, we probably should. That person hadn't worked here in 2 years. Okay, well, let's take that action. Let's reduce the cost here, because the idea is that if we can make this as efficient as possible, we can open up space in your IT budget and hopefully pour that back into the next thing, or maybe some of those additional security products and stance. All right.
So we do have a couple questions that have come in here, Blake. So the first one is, with Azure Cloud PCs and Windows 365 desktops, I assume it's best practice to put a firewall in front of these devices. I'm not aware that Microsoft puts in front to what Microsoft puts in front to protect those devices. So I don't, if you want to take a stab at that, if you want me to first, I'm happy to do that, I guess, quick. From a cloud PC perspective, a couple different ways to deploy those. And one is you can deploy them into what they would consider an Azure network, which typically is an Azure landing zone, which really is defining a set of security constructs, typically a hub and spoke around a firewall or a network appliance that's doing the security services, and then off of that you would hang networks, and then one of those networks would be where you would deploy your desktop. So you're routing traffic through that network security appliance hosted up in Azure. So that's one option. If you choose to just do the native Microsoft Windows 365, again, you're just basically getting a public endpoint directly out. So your firewall really is going to be whatever is on that endpoint device. So again, Defender is included as part of that product stack. So that's going to be running natively. But outside of that, you're basically plugging into the internet at home. You're basically going to be directly exposed and from that perspective. So if you need security and compliance, you're probably going to be looking at more deploying an Azure landing zone with security products, again, a firewall, network security appliance virtually into the Azure environment, defining your networks, and then deploying the Windows Cloud PCs into that existing network. That also gives you the ability to connect those Windows Cloud PCs into on-prem existing services if you need to do that, right? So if you have internal services that are in your data center you need to consume, we can extend that with VPNs from that network security appliance to the on-prem environment for those cloud PCs. So that hopefully that answers the question. I think it was James who answered that. So James, if you have further questions that I didn't answer it, please let us know. The second one that came in, and I'm not as familiar with this, so I'm hoping that potentially you can help answer this one, Blake, came from Casey, and he asked, I'm apologies that I'm not sure if that's a he or she, so I'm not gonna define that. Is Azure Files part of Microsoft Graph? I ask mainly out of interest for connectivity to data for M365 Copilot. I don't know that one offhand. Do you know, Blake, or do we need to
I
take that one
don't. I
offline?
would imagine that if it's not already, that it's very soon to be.
Okay.
I don't know that off the top of my head.
So Casey, let us take that one offline, and we'll see if we can get an answer and circulate that back out. Offhand, I don't have an answer to that one either. I'd have to do a little digging. So let us do that digging, and we'll see if we can get an answer back to that for you. Any other questions? I don't think it looks like it. All right.
Well, I think, yeah, we will follow up on that unanswered question there. But Blake, Randy, thank you both very much. Thank you all for your time. Your time is very valuable to us. Hopefully, again, ideas, insights that might be relevant for you. There will be a survey that will come post completion of the event. Please take a moment to fill out the information, give us feedback. If there's anything that was, really captivated, the information that really brought value to you specific, it always helps us out. If there's anything we can do to improve our events, anything like that, we'd greatly value that. So again, thank you all. Greatly appreciate it. Blake, Randy, great job. And I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thanks all. See you.
Thanks, all.